The 1970s had no shortage of strange. Some songs climbed the charts and left everyone wondering how they got there and who made them. Here is 1970s music. 15 weird one-hit wonders you didn't know. Number 15, Popcorn by Hot Butter, 1972. Popcorn was originally composed by Gershon Kingsley in 1969 and released on an electronic music album that received almost no mainstream attention. The piece was an early experiment in synthesizer-based pop. Kingsley used a Moog synthesizer to create a melody that was cheerful, mechanical, and unlike anything on commercial radio at the time. Hot Butter was the project of studio musician Stan Free, who recorded a new version of Kingsley's composition in 1972 with a more polished arrangement and released it as a single. The result reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States and performed significantly better in Europe, reaching number 1 in several countries. In the United Kingdom, it reached number 5. The track's bubbling, repetitive synthesizer melody made it sound like something from a science fiction film and a children's television program simultaneously, which turned out to be exactly what enough people wanted to push it up the charts. Hot Butter never charted again. Free released follow-up singles under the same name without any commercial success, and the project faded. The song itself has had remarkable staying power. Used in television commercials, children's programming, and film soundtracks with a consistency that spans decades. The original Kingsley composition it was based on was eventually acknowledged as one of the pioneering pieces of electronic pop, and Kingsley received the recognition that Free's chart success had temporarily redirected. Most people who hear Popcorn assume it must be from a cartoon. The reality is stranger and more interesting than that. Number 14, Wildfire by Michael Murphey, 1975.
On a pony she named Wildfire.
Michael Murphey was a Texas singer-songwriter who had been recording since the early 1970s and had built a modest following in the country and soft rock worlds. Wildfire was a different kind of song from what he had been making. A narrative ballad about a young woman who dies in a blizzard searching for her lost pony, and whose ghost then returns on horseback to call the narrator away into the afterlife. It was, by any standard, an unusual premise for a mainstream pop hit. The song reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in June 1975 and spent several weeks in the top 5. It also crossed over to the country chart, reaching the top 40 there as well. The song's production, sweeping strings, a galloping rhythm that evoked a horse at full speed.
They say she died one winter.
And Murphy's plaintive vocal gave it an almost cinematic scale that worked against the expectations of what a mid-1970s radio hit was supposed to sound like. Murphy continued to record and perform, eventually settling into a long career in Western and cowboy music that earned him significant respect in that specific world. He has released numerous albums through the decades and remains active. But Wildfire was the only time the mainstream pop audience paid attention, and the song's subject matter, a ghost story set in a blizzard, built around a dead girl and a supernatural horse, remains one of the stranger number 3 hits the decade produced. People who heard it as children often remember it with an intensity that the song's haunted quality probably explains.
She ran calling wild.
Number 13, Paloma Blanca by George Baker, selection, 1975. The George Baker Selection were a Dutch pop group led by singer Johannes Bowens, who performed under the stage name George Baker. The band had been recording in the Netherlands since the late 1960s and had some success in the European market with earlier releases. Paloma Blanca, the title translates roughly as White Dove, was released in 1975 and became an unexpected international hit, reaching number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States and performing strongly across Europe. The song was built on a simple, repetitive melody with a slightly Spanish flavor, and its production was warm and uncomplicated in a way that gave it broad accessibility. The English language verses alternated with a Spanish chorus that most American listeners couldn't quite parse but found pleasing regardless. It received substantial airplay on adult contemporary radio stations, which in the mid-1970s had an appetite for European soft pop that the American market supplied imperfectly. The George Baker selection never replicated the American chart success of Paloma Blanca. They continued to release music in the Netherlands and had periodic success in the European market. But the American audience that had briefly made them a hit simply moved on. Baker, Bowens, continued performing under the name for decades, eventually becoming a fixture of European nostalgia touring. Paloma Blanca has a particular grip on a certain generation of listeners who heard it on the radio in 1975 and cannot quite explain why the melody has never left them. It is the kind of song that lodges without effort and stays without permission. Number 12, Smokin' in the Boys' Room by Brownsville Station, 1974. Brownsville Station were a Michigan rock band who had been recording since the late 1960s with a sound rooted in hard rock and boogie that owed something to Chuck Berry and something to the Detroit rock scene around them. Smokin' in the Boys' Room was released in 1973 and became their signature moment, reaching number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1974. The song's subject, teenagers sneaking cigarettes in a school bathroom to avoid a strict teacher, was trivial enough to be immediately relatable and delivered with enough energy to work on rock radio without demanding anything from the listener. The band had been playing a version of the song in live sets for some time before the recording connected commercially, and the track had a genuine live energy that translated well on radio.
Now, teacher, don't you feel me? Up with your rules.
Lead vocalist Cub Koda had a raw, unsophisticated delivery that suited the material. This was not a song that needed polish, and it did not have any. Brownsville Station released follow-up singles and albums through the mid-1970s without finding another mainstream moment. The band dissolved and reformed in various configurations through the years. Cub Koda pursued a solo career and became a respected figure in the American roots rock world before his death in July 2000 from kidney disease at the age of 51. Mötley Crüe covered Smokin' in the Boys' Room in 1985 and took it to number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100, a chart position that exceeded the original, which introduced the song to a generation who had no knowledge of where it came from.
Everybody knows that smoking ain't allowed in school.
Number 11, Chevy Van by Sammy Johns, 1975.
'Cause like a picture she was laying there.
Sammy Johns was a North Carolina singer-songwriter who had been working as a session musician and club performer for years without significant commercial recognition when Chevy Van became a hit in 1975. The song describes a young man picking up a hitchhiking woman in his van, a scenario that captured something specific about a particular subculture of the 1970s, when the custom van had become a cultural object with its own aesthetic identity and its own set of social associations. The song reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and spent several weeks in the top 10. Its production was gentle and acoustic-leaning, which gave it a dreamy quality that softened its subject matter enough for adult contemporary radio while retaining enough specificity to connect with a younger audience.
Get some sleep and dream of rock and roll.
The Chevy van of the song's title was a real cultural artifact in ways that dated the song precisely. This was a piece of music that could only have been made in the mid-1970s and could only have connected with an audience living in exactly that moment. Johns released follow-up material without success and gradually receded from the mainstream. He continued performing on the club circuit and in the regional country music world for years afterward. Chevy Van has appeared occasionally in 1970s nostalgia compilations and period-set films, each time locating a listener or viewer exactly in the decade it came from. The custom van subculture that provided its setting has long since passed, which gives the song a very specific period quality that serves it well as a time capsule and badly as a radio track in any other decade.
Me in my Chevy van, and that's all right with me.
Number 10, Hocus Pocus by Focus, 1973. Focus were a Dutch progressive rock band led by guitarist Jan Akkerman and multi-instrumentalist Thijs van Leer, who had developed a sophisticated sound blending rock, jazz, and classical music. They were well regarded in European music circles and had built a genuine following in the Netherlands and the United Kingdom before their music reached the United States. Hocus Pocus was released in the United States as an edited single in 1973, reaching number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. The track features Van Leer alternating between yodeling, operatic wailing, and wordless vocalizations, erupting without warning, cutting off, erupting again, over Ackerman's hard rock guitar work and a rhythm section that moves through tempo, changes with no apparent concern for what radio formats expected. It is not a conventional song in any sense that the word is usually applied. That it reached number 9 on the American Singles Chart is one of the more genuinely improbable facts in 1970s chart history. The American mainstream that bought Hocus Pocus did not follow Focus any further. Their subsequent releases found no comparable chart success in the United States. Ackerman departed the band in 1976, and various configurations have operated under the Focus name since. The song has been rediscovered by successive generations of listeners who encounter it and find it difficult to describe to anyone who has not heard it, which may be the most specific form of legacy a piece of music can have. Number 9, Disco Duck by Rick Dees and his Cast of Idiots, 1976. Rick Dees was a Memphis radio disc jockey who recorded Disco Duck in 1976 as a comic novelty track built around the disco craze that had taken over American popular culture. The song featured Dees doing a Donald Duck-style vocal impression while performing a duck-themed parody of disco dancing, with a full dance floor production underneath it, the 4-on-the-floor kick drum, the strings, the general sonic infrastructure of the genre applied to absurd comic ends. Disco Duck reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1976 and stayed there for 1 week. It was the best-selling novelty record of the year and one of the stranger number 1 singles of the decade.
All of a sudden I begin to change.
Dees faced a legal threat from Disney over the Donald Duck vocal impression before the song's release, but the threat did not prevent the record from reaching stores or the top of the chart. Dees became one of the most successful radio personalities in American broadcasting history, eventually hosting a nationally syndicated weekly countdown show that ran for decades. His career in radio dwarfed his career in music by every measure. He released no follow-up singles that charted meaningfully. Disco Duck stands as the single most commercially successful thing he ever recorded, and one of the more bewildering number 1 songs in American chart history, a disc jockey imitating a cartoon duck over a disco beat, selling more copies in October 1976 than anything else in the country. Number 8. Feelings by Morris Albert, 1975. Morris Albert was a Brazilian singer whose real name is Mauricio Alberto Kaiserman. He had written and recorded Feelings in Portuguese before re-recording it in English for international release. The English version reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1975 and became one of the most covered songs of the decade, recorded by Nina Simone, Ella Fitzgerald, Shirley Bassey, and many others. The song's strangeness is not in its subject, but in its ubiquity relative to the almost complete anonymity of the person who made it. In the United States and the United Kingdom, Feelings became a lounge standard, played at piano bars, used in television programs to signal romance or melancholy, covered constantly.
Feelings.
While Morris Albert himself faded entirely from mainstream awareness. Most people who knew the song by its opening bars could not have named the artist, and most would have been surprised to learn he was Brazilian. Albert returned to Brazil and continued recording and performing to an audience that remained genuinely engaged with his work. He has released albums consistently across the following decades and maintained a career in the Portuguese-speaking music market that the English-speaking world never witnessed. Feelings and its creator exist in a particular relationship. The song made him famous in a world that immediately forgot his name, while his actual career continued somewhere else entirely.
For my life I'll feel it.
Number 7. Moonlight Feels Right by Starbuck, 1976.
You're on your way. Moonlight.
Starbuck were an Atlanta-based soft rock band built around singer and keyboardist Bruce Blackman. The band had formed in the early 1970s and spent several years developing their sound before Moonlight Feels Right reached the mainstream in 1976. The song reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, powered by a marimba solo, an instrument almost never heard in mainstream pop or rock that gave the track an immediately distinctive sound. The marimba runs through the song's instrumental break with a warmth and lightness that created a mood specific enough to feel genuinely original in the context of mid-1970s radio. The production was breezy and romantic, clearly aimed at adult contemporary stations and effective at reaching them.
I finally made a tricky French connection.
The song spent several weeks in the top 10 and became one of the more recognizable pieces of summer-oriented soft rock from that period. Starbuck released follow-up singles and albums without finding another comparable commercial moment. The band dissolved, reformed, and continued in various configurations with Blackman at the center. Moonlight Feels Right has appeared in period-set films and television productions whenever a director wants to place a scene specifically in the summer of 1976. It functions as an extremely precise sonic timestamp. Blackman has spoken about the experience of being associated with a single song for a career spanning decades, with a philosophical acceptance that seems genuine. The marimba solo remains one of the more unexpected sounds to ever make the top 5 of the American singles chart.
Feels right.
Number 6. Muskrat Love by Captain and Tennille, 1976.
Muskrat Susie, Muskrat Sam.
Captain and Tennille, Daryl Dragon and Tony Tennille, were a husband and wife duo who had built a following through their work as backing musicians for the Beach Boys before launching a recording career of their own. They had an enormous hit with Love Will Keep Us Together in 1975, which reached number 1 and won the Grammy Award for Record of the Year. Muskrat Love was a different animal entirely, literally. The song described 2 muskrats, named Sam and Susie, in a romantic relationship, complete with descriptions of their courtship and what appeared to be the sounds of actual animals incorporated into the recording. It was written by Willis Allen Ramsey and had been previously recorded by America in 1973.
Looks like muskrat love.
The Captain and Tenn version was released in 1976 and reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song was performed at a state dinner hosted by President Gerald Ford and Queen Elizabeth II in July 1976, reportedly prompting a notably unenthusiastic reaction from the Queen. That specific detail became one of the most retold anecdotes in the history of American political entertaining. Tony Tenn has discussed the performance in interviews over the years with a mixture of amusement and residual discomfort. The song was mocked extensively at the time and has not been reassessed favorably since. It remains one of those records that sits on the charts as documented fact, while the question of how it got there remains genuinely open.
Susie says yes with a kisses.
Number 5, Billy Don't Be a Hero by Paper Lace, 1974.
Billy, don't be a hero.
Paper Lace were a British pop group from Nottingham who had won a spot on the UK talent show Opportunity Knocks in the early 1970s. Their recording of Billy Don't Be a Hero was a significant hit in the United Kingdom in early 1974, but an American cover version by Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods reached number 1 in the United States before Paper Lace could capitalize. Paper Lace then released The Night Chicago Died as a follow-up American single in the summer of 1974, and it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in August, a song about a fictional Chicago police shootout with Al Capone's gang that had no historical basis whatsoever.
And as Billy started to go,
The combination of both songs in a single year gave Paper Lace the unusual distinction of topping the American chart without having broken through with their biggest UK hit, and doing so with a piece of entirely fictional American history. The band never charted significantly in the United States again. They continued to perform on the UK nostalgia circuit for years. The combination of a war ballad and a gangster story, both fictional, both successful, represents one of the stranger double-hit stories of the decade. Most Americans who remember either song would struggle to name the band behind them.
don't be a hero. Come back to me.
Number 4, Undercover Angel by Alan O'Day, 1977.
Undercover angel, midnight fantasy.
Alan O'Day was a Los Angeles songwriter who had written Helen Reddy's hit, Angie Baby, in 1974, and had built a reputation as a capable professional songwriter in the adult contemporary world. Undercover Angel was his debut single as a performing artist, released in 1977, and it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, spending 1 week at the top. The song described a dream visitation by a beautiful woman, an undercover angel who appears to the narrator at night. Its production was smooth and radio-friendly in the style of late 1970s soft rock, and it was the kind of song that sounded perfectly calibrated for adult contemporary radio, without sounding like anything in particular beyond its category. O'Day released follow-up singles that failed to chart meaningfully and returned primarily to songwriting, where he continued to work productively in the background of the music industry. Undercover Angel is one of the more forgettable number 1 singles of the decade, a song that topped the chart, left almost no cultural trace, and is now retrieved primarily by people searching for one-hit wonders of the 1970s, rather than by people who remember hearing it and went looking for it. That combination of chart success and total cultural disappearance makes it genuinely unusual even within a category full of unusual cases.
Angel, answer to my prayer.
Number 3, Afternoon Delight by Starlin Vocal Band, 1976.
Tight, gonna grab some afternoon delight.
The Starlin Vocal Band were a Washington, D.C.-based quartet consisting of Bill Danoff, Taffy Nivert, John Carroll, and Margot Chapman. Danoff and Nivert had co-written Take Me Home, Country Roads with John Denver several years earlier and had credibility in the folk pop world. Afternoon Delight was released in 1976 and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, staying there for 2 weeks during the summer. The song was built around a double entendre that was transparent enough to be understood and opaque enough for radio stations to play without triggering complaints, a balancing act that the decade's pop radio performed regularly. Radio stations in several markets did flag it, but the song's commercial momentum was not slowed.
And everything's a little clearer in the light of day.
The Starlin Vocal Band won the Grammy Award for Best New Artist at the 1977 ceremony, ahead of a nominee list that included the Boston band that had just released one of the best-selling debut albums in rock history. CBS gave the band their own summer television variety show in 1977. It was canceled after 6 episodes. The band dissolved not long after, and Danoff and Niver's marriage ended as well. Afternoon Delight has survived primarily through ironic rediscovery in subsequent decades, used in television programs and films as a period joke about the 1970s particular brand of cheerful inappropriateness. The Grammy it earned has become, in retrospect, one of the more debated decisions in the award's history.
Rockets in flight. Afternoon delight.
Number 2, In the Year 2525 by Zager and Evans, 1969/heavy 1970s airplay.
In the year 3535.
In the Year 2525 was recorded in 1969, but remained in heavy rotation on radio and appeared on countless compilation albums throughout the 1970s, making it a defining listening experience for the generation that came of age in that decade. Zager and Evans, Rick Evans, and Denny Zager were a duo from Lincoln, Nebraska, who had recorded the song originally for a small regional label before it was picked up for wider release. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July 1969 and stayed there for 6 weeks. It also reached number 1 in the United Kingdom. The track projected forward through the centuries in increments of 1,010 years, imagining the progressive dehumanization of the human species through technology. By the year 5555, humans no longer need their arms or legs. By 7510, they are fed pills rather than food.
You won't find a thing to choose.
By 9595, the species is replaced entirely. The song ended with the possibility of the cycle beginning again. It was, for a pop single, a remarkably bleak vision delivered in a style that was folksy and melodically appealing. A combination that managed to put apocalyptic science fiction on the radio and keep it there for a month and a half. Zager and Evans never charted again. Rick Evans has said the pressure to follow a number 1 record was something neither of them knew how to handle, and they had no mechanism for navigating the industry that had briefly embraced them. The song is a recurring presence in 1970s, nostalgia programming, and in any discussion of one-hit wonders, which is a peculiar kind of immortality for a recording about the end of humanity.
Woman can survive, they may fall.
Number 1, Telephone Man by Meri Wilson, 1977.
I rented my apartment on a Monday at 1 to sing.
Meri Wilson was a Georgia-born singer and songwriter who recorded Telephone Man in 1977 as a novelty track built around the double entendre premise of a telephone installer making a house call. The song was essentially a comic piece, Wilson played the housewife character with theatrical innocence while the lyrics maintained a running parallel between telephone installation and something less innocent. The humor was broad and deliberate. Telephone Man reached number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the Adult Contemporary chart, which may be the most surprising chart placement of the two. Adult Contemporary radio in 1977 was populated largely by soft rock and gentle pop, and Telephone Man sat among those tracks as a broadly comic novelty that somehow appealed to exactly that audience.
I can put it in the bedroom, I can put it in the hall.
The song was also a significant hit in Australia. Wilson released follow-up singles without commercial success and returned to regional performing and entertainment work in the southern United States. She died in a car accident on December the 28th, 2002, at the age of 53. Telephone Man is one of those songs that people who heard it in 1977 recall with a specific kind of embarrassed fondness. The humor has not aged particularly well. The production is firmly of its moment, and the whole thing is transparently a joke. That it reached number 1 on the Adult Contemporary chart remains the most baffling fact attached to it, and one that becomes more baffling the longer it sits with you.
Hey, lolly, lolly, just doing my thing.
The 1970s made room for all of this. The Ghost Horses, the Disco Ducks, the Muskrats, the Telephone Men, and somehow the radio played all of it without blinking. If any of these rang a bell, hit the like button and subscribe. There is always more waiting.